Hello, everyone. Today is October 8th, 2022. Welcome to the Upriver Crawfish. This is another SitRep on the sit in the Special Military Operations in Ukraine. I'm your host, Sankara. Let's begin this report with the map of Ukraine. This is the whole map of Ukraine. This is Crimea. These areas Russia had, and if you see these grayish areas, those are areas that Russia had possession of before, and Ukraine reclaimed or Russia withdrew from them. This is the Donbass areas. This the two republics that are now part of Russia. This Luhansk, and this is Donetsk. There's also Zaporizhia in Kherson, and then we have Crimea here. So the fronts that we'll talk about will be the areas along here, the Donbass area, the Donbass front, the Zaporizhia front, the Kherson front, and now today I show all of you guys have seen the news with the attack on the Crimea bridge. But let's begin first and go in a little with the situation on the battlefield. So, starting in the Donbass area near Kherson, let me scroll there. So, a couple of weeks ago, Ukrainians took over Liman, and they are preparing to attack this area in Crimea and Zvatovo. These are the areas that they want to attack. This is a road that leads from Crimea to Zvatovo, this route. And so far, they are preparing forces along this area to be able to attack. My understanding is that they're trying to attack both Crimea and Zvatovo. From what I've seen, they're trying to do the same thing that they did to Liman by moving a lot of forces from the north to try to bypass attacking Svatovo in a direct frontal assault. So they will try to attack probably from the north, and maybe they're going to try to break in through here. Because lately, what they've been trying to do is to wedge in between the Russian front line and get a breach here in those wedge, and then try to hit at the communication lines. So instead of trying to go in the straight frontal attack. So those are the things they will try to do. They could focus on Svatovo, or they could focus on Crimea. From the Russian part, they have started building out defenses in both Crimea and Svatovo. My understanding is that they have also gone ahead and tried to strengthen all their positions here. So they pulling back from Liman help them save and conserve manpower, and it should allow them to shorten the front a little bit. And my understanding is that they are getting stabilized, but Ukraine is bringing forth a lot of men and equipment ready to storm these areas. So there are other areas too that the Ukrainians are going to try to storm, like and further down in the Donbass. But right now they're collecting men. Their thought is that they have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, within this area they're trying to force and the assault on Zvatovo and Crimea anywhere between 20 to 40,000 men that they are bringing to bear in this area. So the Russians have dug up defensive lines instead of they're going to put up some static defensive lines, and they're going to try to hold those positions. They have formed a triangle. I understand they have formed a triangle along here, along the Svatovo, Starobilsk, and Crimea positions. So that's one area that Ukraine is trying to attack, and So far, they're amassing manpower for that. Let me then go over to Kherson. In Kherson, we saw that the Russians did pull back. They did pull back also in Kherson. So this area here, all of this area, was held by the Russians before. The Russians withdrew back to again shorten their defensive lines. Again, they're short on troops because from the strategy that the Russian High Command is using, they're still in this special military operations. So they have not brought a lot more manpower yet. Now, some of the things that people are saying that the Russians have withdrawn the last couple of weeks from different places, and for pro-Russian people, this is disheartening to see that, especially considering that the Russian military really hasn't asserted itself yet. At the beginning of the war, they asserted themselves and whatnot, but when they came here, from what I've now learned, I don't know how true this is that this whole line that were being held from Kharkov all the way down here, when it got to the second phase, really only about 60 some thousand men were in this battle. 25,000 of which was put into Kherson. So that meant a lot of shortage in infantry manpower, and most of the fighting were done by the republics, the Donbass, the Donbass republics, and then also you had Wagner and some the Chechens, and also some volunteers that were doing most of the fighting. So far, what the Russian game plan is, we don't know. But what can we talk? What do we see and we can talk to? So even in these different withdrawals, what we notice happening is that the Ukrainians will amass a lot of manpower. They will attack the Russians. The Russians will put up a fight, kill a lot of Ukrainians, kill a lot of them, and then the Russians will pull back without a fight. And then the Russians will kill them, and when the Russians see they're about to get in circle again, they will pull back, losing, taking minimal casualties and losses from of equipment. So this is not good on the Ukrainian side. I mean, from a propaganda perspective, it looks pretty. They can make noise about it. The U.S. got another. The U.S. can claim that the reason this is happening is because of actually, I've seen that today, that they claim that the reason this is happening is because of the HIMARS. That's not true. Those are very little, not doing anything that special. They are annoying. They manage to hit places every now and then and cause some annoying damages, but not enough to really change the situation on the ground. What's making the withdrawals has to do more with manpower, and if anything, the U.S. Trying to use satellite information and stuff to give Ukraine more intelligence and for them to use their manpower to wedge between Russian lines. So again, if you heard my previous update, mention that the U.S. Or U.S. captain once wrote that the best way to attack the Russian battalion tactical groups, since they are low in manpower, was to attack multiple areas along their communication lines with a lot of manpower, and then get to the rear to cut off the command center. But that's not even happening because the Ukrainians are not seizing they're not really trapping a lot of Russian troops. So far, they're standing themselves, and if or when the Russians decide to actually fight this war, and deal Ukraine the proper spanking that needs to be done, then Ukraine could be caught in a very bad situation. That's the case for Donbass, and that would be the case for the Kherson front as well. So remember, initially the Ukrainians attacked Kherson. They got bloodied a lot. They lost over about maybe about a division, close to a division worth of men, around 11,000 men. That they lost in that attack. That's killed and wounded, and they had been attacking ever since, and they have been blooded. But then all of a sudden, the Russians decided to pull back when the Ukrainians attacked here, and the Russians pulled back from Zolotaya Boka. They pulled back further, even to the Docheny. There's a area here, reservoir area. I think along here. These white spaces are what you call gray zones. No one is really holding men in these areas. All right. So let's see if I can bring the map to show some of the areas. So right now the Russian forces all along Mylovo, they're protecting these areas, and so far the Ukrainians have tried to attack, and they have been getting their behind handed to them so far. But they're still lining up men and trying to attack there. Now, one other thing that is happening so far, there's also reports that the Ukrainians are lining up a serious amount of force to go into Zaporizhia, to attack Zaporizhia area. They are amassing tons of forces around this area, and again another couple of tens of thousands of forces, and the talk is that they are probing these areas. In one of their probing attacks earlier, sometime this week, some American and Polish mercenaries with them tried to probe the line, and they got killed and wounded. So they're trying to move. When they do attack here, the places that they want to take is they want to move forces to Melitopol and to Berdyansk. These are the areas they want to move forces to. One of the things that they're going to do, if they could actually cut through down to Berdyansk and Melitopol, what they're going to do is they're going to destroy, cut out the land bridge that Russia has to move forces to the Kherson area, and to this land bridge to Crimea. Now, don't think that the Russians will sit and just allow that. One of the things we're noticing is that the Russians bringing in more equipment, and they seem to be bringing in more troops. Remember, the Russian standing forces was around 900 to about 900,000 to about a million men. This stuff, they allocated only about 200,000 plus to this stuff in battle. In the initial stages, about 100 and some thousand of them were put to bear in the fight, and then after when the second phase began, after they secured what the areas that they wanted to secure on the east, and then bring in their equipment, they then pulled back some of those forces, and we're now learning that they're only around 60,000 men. So the Russians, for some reason, they have not yet taken this fight to Ukraine fully. They are holding their own hands behind their back and fighting Ukraine, while Ukraine is trying to do everything, and the U.S. is trying to do everything, even resorting to terrorism for this action. Let me show you a couple of clips from the Telegram today around the these different areas, about battles in the Donbass area, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And then we'll go later on to Crimea to talk about the bridge attack today. So here are some of what the Ukrainians are experiencing in Kherson. This is a battle when they try to attack more places in Kherson, and the Russian VDV smoked the crap out of them. So it just shows a few vehicles. I mean, the destruction that they have. They're losing men and equipment in their attacks, where the Russians are losing very minimal manpower, very minimal equipment. So remember, Ukraine's equipment has to come from outside the country. The Russians don't have that problem. Destruction, U.S. vehicles. All right. So here is a better map to show you the situation around Kherson. So remember, these areas here were held by the Russians before. The Russians pulled back. They left the area around Zolotaia Boka. They left an area around somewhere closer here around Dorcheny, Davida Broad. They left all those areas. The Ukraine have been probing and trying to attack, but every time they try, they get hit and they get pushed back. The Russians pulled back to shorten the line because they knew that the Ukrainians were going to try to capture the men in this area through a pincer. So the Russians pulled back to shorten the defensive lines. The Ukrainians have also been trying to attack in this area around the Pravdany area and the Ternopil area, or Posavkovsky area, right in this area. They've been trying to attack. As their forces, let's show all the blue lines here are Ukrainian forces. They're regrouping to come and attack in these areas around the Sukhoi-Stavok. This is an area where the Ukrainians lost a lot of men the last time that they attacked. They lost a lot of men in that attack, and even in the Davida Broad, they lost a lot of men over there. But the Russians pulled back, let them have the place. They're gaining territory, but to gain those territory, they are losing a lot of men. And they will keep trying to push, and the Russians will keep trying to defend it. Now, let's see if they will make the Russians pull back again. But again, remember, as the Russians pull back, they are not losing men. Their men are not getting destroyed. They are conserving combat power until that point in which they're going to attack. Now, a lot of pro-Russians not happy and want this to the retreats to end and Ukraine to get sacked already. I myself am in that group, but the Russians have a plan and they're sticking to it. So let's see. So these were the foreign mercenaries, Americans amongst them, that were decided that they were going to probe the Zaporizhia front lines. Here are more of them. They decided they were going to probe the Zaporizhia front lines, and they got smoked for it. Let's see here. There are more. Here's some of their bodies. They got caught and destroyed, and some of them escaped with injuries. So that's that. This is a group of Polish mercenaries that were traveling in, I think, the Zaporizhia area, and they were taken out by ATGM. You see the vehicle traveling. I don't know if they have fired the. Seems like the smoke behind there means that they have fired the ATGM already. There you go. Well, yeah, everyone in that car definitely got denazified. So, in this video, this is a former prisoner with that joined Wagner Group, the orchestra, and he's been fighting on the front and earned himself a medal.
Заумелое командование веренным подразделением. За образцовое выполнение боевых задач командования на фронте борьбы с украинскими захватчиками, а также проявленные при этом личное мужество и героизм, Вершинов Сергей Николаевич награждается званием Героя Луганской Народной Республики с вручением звезды «Золотая звезда». Поздравляю.
Служу России.
Okay. So this is I think a Twitter posting from the Daily Mail about the attack on the Crimea Bridge. And yesterday was President Vladimir Putin's birthday. So it goes massive explosion destroys the only bridge between Russia and Crimea. Happy birthday, Vlad. These people. So yeah, oh man, the UK. So yeah, they apparently rubbing it in the Russians that a terrorist attack was carried out on the Crimea Bridge that took out a couple of spans of the bridge. But the bridge, some parts of it is still working. Actually, trains and automobiles have been going back. But yes, let's talk about let me show other photos and then we'll talk about the Crimea attack. So that's the video of the Crimea Bridge being attacked. So you see there's a truck. Yeah. Let me pull that back again. So you see this truck here, and just as a vehicle tried to overtake it, and there's another vehicle coming here. But I think it missed this vehicle. And then there was the explosion. After the bridge was attacked, there was a train carrying fuel, and 9 of the cars on the train caught on fire. So that's what you see the burning is from. So this seemed like it was planned. The attack was planned to take place just when those trains were on the bridge. That to me tells me that this came from Western help. That's what I believe. This was Western help. And it comes back to what Dmitry Peskov said earlier last week, that the U.S. confessed that Ukraine was behind Daria Dugina's murder. Could be that they know of something, a new terrorist attack coming, that they want to wipe their hands clean off. And it seems exactly that that's the case. Let me go and show you the article about what Dmitry Peskov said. So on Thursday, the U.S. confessed to the fact that Ukraine was behind the killing of Dario Dugina. As you remember, Dario Dugina was a journalist and the daughter of one Russian pro nationalist. I think he's a philosopher. He was the daughter. She was the daughter of I think Alexander Dugin. Dugin, that's his name, and she was murdered by the Ukrainian special services. The Russians already found this out, but the U.S. Came out through the New York Times saying that their hands were they didn't know that it was going to happen, and if they had known they were going to try to stop it, but they went and scolded Ukraine after the fact. So Dmitry Peskov had this to say: "We really want to hope that this is not some attempt by the American colleagues who may possess certain information to distance themselves from responsibility for future terrorist attack and for terrorist acts that the Ukrainian state may be preparing." So that's exactly true. The U.S. So this is Dario Dugina, by the way. The U.S. only confessed that because they probably knew of what was coming, what the Ukrainians were planning with their help. Because I'm very sure that the Ukrainians, the U.S. knew about this planning, and I won't be surprised if they helped with it. So President Putin, in his speech lately, seemed to understand the threat. From his speech, he seemed to understand the threat. But so far, the actions of having yet been increased to make the Ukrainians pay for things that they've been doing, all these terrorist actions that they've been doing. So I hope he understands, and I'm sure he does, that the West is not going to back off just because of threats. You're going to have to destroy these people, destroy their ability to fight for them to stop. They don't respect you. So there's no reason for why you should think that there's some deal to be made. They will always see the deal, request for a deal, as weakness. What I'm sure Russia is planning something. There's no way Ukraine wins this war. The Russian army, the Russian military hasn't even really fought. And every time when the Ukrainians try to attack as best as they can, when the Russians stand and fight, the Ukrainians get killed and massacred. When the Russians decide to stand and fight, the Ukrainians get massacred. Ukrainian general staff sit in luxury in Kiev, in the command centers, in decision-making centers, and they are not touched. They are not in fear for their life. The Ukrainian political leadership is not in fear for their life. All of those guys that have called for attacks on Russia, for terrorist attacks, some of which have been enacted, they are sitting pretty. Ukrainian infrastructure still running. The Russians not attacking it. And even when the Russians attack, they attack infrastructures in the eastern part of Ukraine that the Ukrainians are using. So it's not bothering them, the Ukrainians right now. Russia has to understand that this fight, they're going to have to take it to the U.S. And there's no deal coming. The U.S. have seen a willing stooge, a willing vassal that willing to put the lives of their soldiers on the line to achieve Washington's goal. I mean, what the U.S. can fight this war sitting back and trying all the strategies to attack Russia without getting the skin in the game, without losing anything. And until the Russians make them pay, they're not going to do it. They're not going to stop. So President Erdogan's, one of his advisors came out, I think yesterday or today, saying that Russia wants a new grand deal with the West. Erdogan is a snake. He plays both sides. So I hope Russia is not really looking for a deal, because there is none there to be had. The U.S. doesn't want a deal. They think they can break Russia using Ukraine. And Ukraine itself thinks, well, I mean, the leadership thinking, well, nothing really is happening to us because the U.S., maybe the U.S. is protecting us. That's why Russia is not attacking our leaders. So the Ukrainians have nothing to fear. They can continue doing this bullshit. So President Putin, I'm sure the Russians can crush Ukraine any day. But Putin needs to make that decision. Right now, the Russian public is furious. All this nonsense talk about Ukraine and about regime change in Russia. I wonder, the West, who do they think they will get? They're not going to get someone who's going to come and say, oh, sorry, and this regime changed now, and so we took out Putin because now we want to bow down to the West. Who will come after Putin will be tougher and will have a tougher response for the West if they could get him overthrown. First of all, that's not going to be the case unless Putin decides that he's not going to actually let Russia fight this war. Right? So this is where we are now. Russia's move is the one. So far, the Russians haven't said anything about the attack on the Crimea bridge. My belief is that they're going to respond with action. They should respond with action. It's admirable that they take the high road all the time. But when this continue to happen, the Ukrainians will continue to be emboldened. And I will tell you, it won't be too long before they will attempt to target Russian leadership. It will not be too long before they will try to do that. Or more than just Russian leadership. They might try to do something within the Kremlin. So, whatever decisions that need to be made, whatever reason that the Russian military is being held back, that decision needs to come and change that pretty soon. This one is it shows stupidity of some of the Ukrainians. Is their own minefield. They came upon a mine, saw the mine, and took selfies with the mine, and still decided that they were going to drive over it. Not understanding that it's possible there are more minefields ahead. There are more mines ahead. I'm going to lower the volume because it has a famous sitcom, a theme song on there. So I'm going to lower it so that I don't get a strike for that. But take a watch. See, it's harmless. You just drive around. It's just a road, but see, it's a friendly mind. See, that stupidity. Got it. Your friend killed or nearly killed. This guy is dazed. I could imagine. I wonder who made them go over the mine, where was he sitting? He should have been the one in the front seat, in the driver's seat. Anyway, guys, so this is my update. Let's this run out. Please do subscribe, like to help with the algorithms, and by all means, share. Oh, comment as well. And you trolls, I know you guys are eager. Come on. I love you trolls. So come on, bring it on. What do you guys want to say this time now? No, Russia is withdrawing. Cocos are still getting killed. And they're only taking minimal areas that Russians pull out from. But hey, come on. I love me some trolls. Oh, belly up.